Thank you, Mike, for agreeing to be with me today and talking to a stranger. And
Sure.
I really want this to be two Asian Americans talking, because people don't get to see this or hear this or understand this. And so as first, we're going to talk to you as Mike, but then we're going to talk about City of Seattle, because you're the deputy mayor. So first of all, Mike Fong. So I'm Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, and I'm third generation Chinese and Swedish, fourth generation Japanese from Seattle. And so that's where I'm speaking from. So tell me about you, and what are you feeling about the whole situation?
Sure, sure. Thanks, Jolene. Thanks for inviting me on to have this conversation. So, um, I was born and raised in Spokane. My great grandfather, and it's great that you asked this question because I've been doing a little bit of ancestry research lately,
Yeah.
actually, and have gone back and tried to understand a little bit about sort of I knew my great grandfather. He was from Guangzhou, Guangdong, China,
Hmm.
and in the Kaiping area. And he came to the United States in the early 1920s to make a better life for himself and send money back to his family, and started out working in restaurants and through across the country, from places like Oklahoma to Pennsylvania and then ultimately ended up in Spokane. Um, and while I knew him growing up as a kid, didn't really know a whole lot about his story and his history. So the ancestry research we've been doing recently gave me a chance to kind of dig in and find out more, and it's been really fascinating. Um, but he came in 1921, and then many decades later, was able to bring other members of our family over to the United States, including my grandparents, and then ultimately my mom and dad and the rest of their family. And we've family settled in Spokane in the 50s and has been there ever since. I moved to Seattle in the early 90s to go to college at the University of Washington.
My
And
parents too. Huskies, also Huskies everywhere.
go dogs. And I've been working at City Hall ever since graduating, since 2001, and have been really just sort of in various roles in city government, working for elected officials, working on policy, and now I'm in the mayor's office. So that's just kind of the 2-minute version.
Yeah, so you're in it. So tell us
Mhm.
about now with Asian hate that's coming to the forefront, and now a few more people know about it. How is it impacting you?
Well, it's lots of emotions. I mean, it's uh, obviously, you know, we're seeing these incidents make headlines across the country, and it certainly invokes a lot of feelings of anger and frustration. But at the same time, I think for a lot of Asian Americans, it opens the door really on some personal reflection of your own personal experiences, whether with um, hate or discrimination or racism, and bring some of those issues to the forefront uh, that often don't get talked a lot about, and um, at least sort of publicly. And but in that context, I think what's happened is certainly really important for Asian Americans across the country to sort of make their voices certainly heard in the current context of issues making the news. But maybe more importantly is that it starts to lift up the fact that kind of the insidious nature of racism just hovering underneath the surface is so important to start lifting up and talking about in a much more open and public way. And even though that can be very painful, at the same time, I think it invites a lot more dialogue that's so important right now as people think about and process um, what we should be doing, how to push back, but also how to make change. And I think that's really important and inspiring in some ways. So,
Can you share with us like what kind of conversations you're having with,
sure.
with your family or your friends, people around you?
Yeah, and on a just in my role at work, obviously have had the opportunity to talk with a lot of uh, 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 friends and also colleagues in the Asian American community, and have really, and my preferred approach has been more sort of one-on-one kind of touch points, and just to get a sense of how people are feeling, and just and also inviting them to share with me, um, given where I sit in the city government, to try to see how the city can be helpful in this space. Um, so I've talked with people that are activists and those that work for community organizations, older generation leaders in the community, but also younger folks too, and people that really aren't involved or engaged in politics at all. And I think it's just so important to get that kind of wide range of perspective. And I find one-on-one conversations to be more frank and helpful. And what I'm hearing is just a whole host and range of uh, uh, perspectives. I mean, a lot of fear and concern for the safety, particularly of more vulnerable communities in our API communities, seniors. Um,
Can you talk about that? Because I think
yeah, yeah,
people, you're talking very general.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
I think people they could connect to something. So if you could share, for example,
yeah.
the other day I was just so mad because I'm just like, ugh, it's so
Mhm,
frustrating because I was looking, who are Asian Americans out there that I know that recognize this out loud and
yeah.
that will talk online.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh shoot. I think I like 95% of the Asian Americans that I know, like quickly, I did a quick look on their Facebook pages and there's nothing on their
Yeah.
walls. There's nothing. That doesn't
Mhm,
mean it doesn't impact them, but that means they're not comfortable, likely, to say
mhm,
anything. And
mhm.
so for me, I'm like, do I know any Asian Americans who will speak out loud? And I was like, I don't know. Let me call my college people from 20 something years ago. I was like, Eileen. She's like,
Yeah,
Jolene? I'm like, yeah, hey. And so we just talked about Stop Asian Hate because I'm like going nuts because I don't know where to put my frustration because I am
yeah,
seeing like there was a gal who her eyes were shot, you know, her eyes were shot, and there's other gal who was also shot, and this doesn't even make the news. And
mhm.
like people don't know about it, and so I'm so frustrated. And so there are a few Asians that I've talked to that I'm able to talk to, but and
Yeah,
they're crying a lot also. I'm just wondering like what kind of conversations, I don't expect those conversations, but like
yeah, yeah.
what are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I'll give a couple examples of some. I've talked with folks that I've had, non sort of city hall work
Yeah.
relationships with. I coach basketball up at Jefferson Community Center in Seattle for many years through an organization called Seattle Chinese Athletic
Oh
Association.
yeah,
And
that's a big group.
yeah, it's a big group, and but not a political group
Yeah.
necessarily. I mean,
Yeah.
it's families and kids, and talking with some people involved in that organization, just to get a temperature
Yeah.
read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Folks are definitely talking in the community, and this is what I wanted to understand in terms of, like it's not, I'm not getting a flood of people contacting me necessarily, but what
Can,
I
can
am
you
is when I reach out and ask people, hey, how are you doing? I just really want to get a feel for
yeah.
what's going on, and how are you, also just to check in on folks, just how people are doing. And what more often than not, what I'm getting is sort of just an unleashing of emotional and interesting perspective, and just in terms of how the all of the recent attention on hate crimes, has brought, either brings back personal feelings or memories of their own experiences, or as people talk with each other in community. As I mentioned, there are concerns about our elders, and there's a generational divide too. I'm hearing a lot about younger generation folks really wanting to, let's fight back, let's really organize, and let's make our voices heard. And then there are others in our community that, either um, uh, Cantonese speakers, non-English speakers, the seniors that are really not necessarily maybe linked in to a lot of that kind of activity, but at the same time, they are having the same conversations about fears of just being on the streets of Chinatown ID, and just daily routine of going to the grocery store, and et cetera, and just what can be done to both help folks restore a sense of safety and security, but at the same time hold space for really big, broad, challenging, intersectional type of conversations that really require people to speak up and speak out. And I think there are people that are getting very tactical. There are people talking about, let's form neighborhood watch groups. Let's let people are motivated to look in on neighbors and check in on each other. How do we get people organized, whether that be on WeChat forums or in person, but and then there are also the common refrain of the struggle in the context of, what do we do next? What is the best place to channel so much energy? And more often than that leaves an open-ended sort of conversation about what's next. I mean, I that just gives you a little bit of flavor of some of the things I'm hearing about, but it's tough, and it's wide ranging.
Mike, can you also share from your perspective, why do you think a lot of Asians don't say anything?
Well, I've been given this a lot of thought lately, and can really only draw upon my own
Right.
own
Yep.
personal experience,
Mhm.
right? And there's a lot of truth in reading a lot of uh, you know uh, people that are speaking up and talking about sort of the history of Asian Americans in this country. And I can only speak for sort of my own sort of experience growing up in Spokane, but there is truth to this notion, I think, of um, being invisible is a way to sort of fit in and be safe in the sort of American cultural environment. And for many of our sort of my father, grandfather, great grandfather's generation, um, that is a model of approaching their interactions, societal interactions, in order to sort of, for lack of a better term, kind of survive in sort of white dominant culture, I think. Um, and given some of that history, we can go all the way back: Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment, the hatred spewed out of this despicable president we just had. It's all sort of reinforces, I think, some of the ways Asian Americans have approached sort of protecting themselves through some of these challenging times. However, um, folks have persevered, and I think that that sort of history has a lot to do with why maybe it's sometimes a little tougher for folks to speak out, just because of their past generations, and how folks have gotten through their challenges. So
Yeah, I think people don't understand. Um, why don't
yeah,
they just speak up? And it's just like, it's not the culture. I'm an oddball,
yeah,
and I'm fourth generation. So and I was taught so it's like, because I'm fourth generation, I think that has a lot to do with it. My parents
mhm,
maybe have a little bit to do with it perhaps as well. But
yeah, yeah.
um, what are the conversations now with the city of Seattle? What are the conversations you're having to address the Asian hate?
Yeah, so in the immediate sort of aftermath, I mean, we had our hate crime incident
Yeah.
in the CID, and then of course the
Can you share with us? Because a lot of people don't know about it.
oh, there was an incident where I believe it was two individuals, Japanese American woman, I believe, was assaulted on the corner of, I think, 7th and King in the Chinatown International District a few weeks ago. And the good news related to that is that the Seattle Police Department actually made an arrest in that case recently. But she was assaulted in what can only be described as a hate crime. Now, whether it gets charged as that or not is an entirely
Yeah.
different issue. Um, but uh, but given that, and then of course the set in the backdrop of all the various other incidents, increasing incidents of violence against Asian Americans across the country, we've sort of responded at least immediately with the sort of supports to the community, um, increased sort of community service officers and police presence in the community or in areas where there could be concerns about heightened hate crimes against members of the API community. So operationally, we've been with Chief Diaz's support, making some of those tactical decisions just to try to um, help folks with a sense of security and safety. But then beyond that, on the other end of the spectrum is obviously just ensuring there's so many organizations in our community that work with API folks in so many different support efforts and different parts of the community, that now is probably more important than ever to just make sure that those organizations are being resourced to be able to do what they do best, which is, provide the kinds of services and supports to people in language and other means to make sure folks feel supported in community and not necessarily things that government can do itself. So in the next week or so, I hope that, with the mayor's support, I will be advancing some emergency funding along with the city council and hopefully upwards of $1 million to support organizations that work in this space in various support efforts, coalition against hate and bias.
So what I'm hearing is to amplify the voices, the people who are already doing it, like my friend Eileen and
Yeah.
Amy. They're already in it. They know what's going on. They have a pulse on their people to amplify them.
Yep.
What about just brainstorming here, having some, there's also anti-hate training that people can take, Holler Back and Advancement and something or other, I'll put in the links. What about having some Zoom events with Seattle Lights of the do-gooders? Hey, here's kind of the situation. Let me give you more about it. And there's more violence that you have no idea about that we hear about. It's just not covered. And to reach out to your Asian friends, and silence is more painful than anything. And, I was listening to the Stop Asian Hate program today. It's 12 hours. And it's like saying, I don't know what to say to you, but just saying that. Like, so if I'm a non-Asian person, I'm like, hey, Jolene, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. I don't know what to do, but I'm here. I'm not sure what to say, but I'm here for you. And that's the big,
Jolene, no, I think I think you hit it right on the head in terms of both in terms of finding, creative ways, especially in the pandemic environment, for us to be able to engage with folks and bring the folks to the table that have the experience working around these issues, and just having good dialogue. But on that point, I have found that I think encouraging people to talk about the issues, even when we don't have the answers, is so important right now, because I certainly don't feel like I have all the answers, but I think it's really important to have those tables open for conversation so that we can sort of think through these issues together. And truthfully, there's a lot of difference in opinions about what should be done, or so. But if I have an ask, I guess is that as folks have those conversations, is just be mindful of the different places people are coming from around these issues, and just really more than not right now is probably important just to be able to listen to each other and surface these perspectives as much as possible, and we may disagree on the solutions, but doesn't mean we can't move forward together on things we do agree on. So,
Mike, you just talked about you don't have to have the answers, and I appreciate that because
yeah.
as I was like going nuts yesterday, which I do every couple hours, like get frustrated, and I think, okay, well, City of Lake Forest Park on Nextdoor, I posted several things, and it's like, so what about the white people who are shot? You don't care about them, and then you have people like, what racism? What are you talking about? And I have these types of comments. This is in my neighborhood,
Mhm.
and I was thinking, maybe I could talk to City of Lake Forest Park. Maybe I could
Mhm.
get some people to say, let's do something or do something, but I don't have the answers. So I'm like, I'm not sure if I should say anything because,
Yeah. No, no, I did. Absolutely, you should say something. I mean, that's the
so
and I mean, my perspective on it. I mean, in the city of Seattle, government. I mean, we've been, probably since the early 2000s, have had an initiative focused on race and social justice, and I fortunately was here when the initiative first started, and I remember for many, many years that part of the conversation and initiative was simply to open the door to be able to talk about issues,
yeah, yeah,
because yeah, it's and through all the conversations and trainings and other things that we do, it's still and yet the most difficult thing for people to talk about openly with each other, whether it's particularly for people of color, and then also how best to engage, white allies, and but opening that door is hard, and but you've got to open it before it can lead to anywhere.
yeah,
so
yeah,
so
yeah,
so in some ways, yeah, I mean, it's not all too surprising that you're getting some of that feedback and perspective, but at least folks are talking about it openly. And I started by saying that some of it that's even worse is how insidious it is when it's underneath the surface and not lifted up. I mean, if
yeah,
it's out
yeah.
in the open, we're talking about it, at least we're trying to get somewhere with it.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I know that Nextdoor is not a safe place. I absolutely know that because I posted on Me Too about
yeah,
several years ago, and that was the most popular one. And this guy had just weird things. I actually looked him up to make sure he's not a sex offender because I'm
yeah,
like, am I in danger? And
yeah.
just a lot of people had a lot of things to say that were crazy. And
Mhm.
so, but I think it's good to know who you're living around. My friend who is very popular and knows, anyways, he
Yeah,
said, oh, these two white guys were yelling racial slurs at him in their truck, and that's right by my house. And what if he what if he decided to like stand up for himself and like you know take
mhm,
the offense? What would have happened then?
mm,
And so
yeah,
it's just,
yeah,
so it's not safe, but also just understanding who's living in your neighborhood. I did post in my Buy Nothing group,
mhm,
and I requested, can I have the gift of please contact your Asian friends and just say hello, I care, and just contact them.
yeah,
And then I have a whole slew of different things they can do. These
yeah,
are mostly white wives and
mhm,
mothers, and they're all super nice, but of course they wouldn't know what's going on. And so
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
hoping any kind of network I have, I'm like trying to sneak in, like, can we talk about this?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's great.
but
I
it's
mean, that's
hard.
I mean, it's extremely hard, and um, I mean, you raised the question about what should people do, right? I mean, it's difficult enough of a conversation for folks within the Asian American community, let alone to ask, white allies in terms of what they should be doing, right? And it's a very tough question. I mean, but in general, all the things that you're talking about in terms of being supportive of one another and sort of obviously, folks are actually folks are actually scared. There are people that
Yeah.
are fearful, and that's not right. And I mean, first and foremost is we've got to address that, and city government has part of that responsibility, but community has a lot of that responsibility as well.
Yeah,
So,
I went to for my first restaurant experience indoors for the very first time in a year. for
Mhm.
my uncle's death day. We went to Ranch 99 to TNT, which
Uh-huh.
is in Linwood. So it's not even, it's
Yeah.
in the suburbs. And when I was in there are, a bunch of seniors as well as my parents. And we sat in the corner, and then my view was out at the window. I could see the windows. I was like, oh, this is easy
Mhm.
pickings for somebody who just want to take a machine gun and take everybody out. And I was thinking, okay, you know what? I will have my parents. My mom's hard of hearing, so I don't know. I'd have to yell. Like, I was like, okay, they get on the ground and crawl over, and then I call 911. I actually went through this, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Terrible.
a tough cookie, and so for
Yeah.
me to even think about that, it's
Mhm.
deep. Yeah.
It really is, and it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. Just hearing you describe that is just it's um, I wish people wouldn't have to think that way, but the fact that we are means there's something seriously wrong right
Yeah,
now.
and I just I'm gonna do a number of these conversations, but I'm also asking my white friends to talk with me. They have to be brave to be on
Mhm.
camera. It's so hard.
Yeah.
My best friend is going to talk with me because she represents the white do-gooder, but
Yeah.
doesn't quite understand. And us being able to have a dialogue. Okay, well, if that yellow screen, oh,
Yeah.
Asian love, that's like fetish to me. That's not
Oh,
healthy. And so having like describing, well, why can't we do, instead of hate, how about love?
yeah.
So I'm gonna explain to her, well, that doesn't, that says the problem doesn't exist,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it just dismisses it. You're invisible, and
Yeah.
and there's no action items, and it's
Yeah.
just like, let's pretend it doesn't happen. And we're white, we don't have to care because we don't have to. It doesn't really affect us. And so
Yeah.
explaining that, and I like at the city, as I think right now, with city of Seattle, we could have some
Mhm.
conversations because you have a number of Asian American staff.
Yes. Yeah, we do. And both in our mayor's office and also among our cabinet. We have a very diverse cabinet, and I think the most Asian American API members of our cabinets in the history of the city. I think so. It's a great opportunity for our
Yeah,
folks to engage the community and have those conversations. And also, it's important for the city to be out front here, and
yeah.
be visible as well. So
Well, Mike, I can envision. So I watched
yeah, yeah.
so a number of like six people talking,
Uh-huh.
Karate
Mhm.
Kid gal, Tomlin, Tamita, and then a number of actors and actresses also,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
sharing what they are doing and seeing. And I can see that with your staff,
yeah.
and
Mhm. Great
I
idea.
could also help because I think just hearing the different
Mhm.
perspectives,
Mhm.
and also they don't have to represent, oh, I'm representing a million countries and different
Yeah,
generations. I
yeah,
think that kind of format just gets to, it's comfortable.
yeah. I agree. I mean, I uh well, like we started to. I mean, like I said, I prefer the smaller group conversations and one-on-ones because you can just get a little more rich perspective from
Yeah,
folks. And I think these are great ideas. These are great ideas, and keep them coming. I mean, that's what we want to encourage people to do. Is how do we kind of keep the conversation happening in a way that's we want it to be productive and kind of advance the ball on the conversation. But the first step is really just being open about, willing to talk about it, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
even when you don't even know what you might say or what you might do. But I really have been inspired by listening to people in their own communities, organizations, or groups having that dialogue. And often it's not clear what the next step is, but it's important to get it out in the open, and hopefully, we can then start having some of those cross-pollinating conversations that can lead to concrete action. And
yeah,
but it's a good start. I mean, I'm really heartened by how many people have been coming out to rallies, and also in particular as these efforts, the public rallies have gone to smaller communities across the region, because in Seattle we have a very significant API population, and obviously in Chinatown ID, but in some of the other surrounding areas it may be a little harder to figure out how to network in. And I think the stuff that you're doing is great, and virtually, and the more we can do to just help people find those connections, I think that's really important too. Because it may not be as easy for some folks as others to make those um, connections. So.
Mike, will you be able, with you and your team, be able to put like on your social media kind of open calls for discussions or brainstorms or,
Sure,
and
sure,
I
yeah,
have lots of resources all over of what to do, you know,
yeah.
of what to
That's it.
share, things to say if they
Mhm.
support, and where you don't really have to think about it. We want you to understand the problem and see it, but then, because I would
Yeah,
love to see your social media just blow up with awareness.
great. Yeah, no, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll have our
Okay, you
team.
got that on camera. That's
Yeah,
recorded,
we'll do
mister.
it. We'll find ways to have those conversations, and we'll find ways to get the word out on what folks could be doing, and make sure people are aware. So.
Okay, any final thoughts?
No, just that keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I mean, I think part of it is just every medium we can to get people to feel comfortable that this is a safe space to talk about these issues. And no matter how frustrating or angry or fearful we might be right now, truth of the matter is the community is time and time again has shown how strong it is and resilient. I think this is, to quote Representative Meng from New York, where she said that we have been taught, and many of us, to persist through being invisible in some ways,
Yeah.
but now is the time that's just we need to move beyond that, and I think what you're seeing across the country from Asian Americans is their voices are going to be heard. So.
It's two positive things because I have lots of negativity as well. So I just want to compensate on that. So I belong to the collective, which is part like the Columbia Tower Club.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
used to belong there for a while, but they have a new modern, and it's a really ecological and friendly and the most diverse
Mm.
membership that I've ever seen ever. And
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, wait a second. Oh my gosh, the collective, they're so supportive. And then the GM called me like within minutes and he's like, yes, let's do this. So I'm going to run have him have a conversation for the membership.
Yeah.
So that is
Great.
exciting because
Great.
that's an example that I didn't feel invisible. I was validated. I see you, I
Yeah.
hear you. Because
Yeah.
with Nextdoor shut down, City of Kenmore didn't let me post.
Mm.
The Buy Nothing group, super supportive.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's that invisibility thing is so prevalent. And so it was yay to them.
No,
Okay,
that's great. That's
well, let's
great.
continue talking. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Mike.
Good
I
to talk to
appreciate
you.
it. All
You
right.
bet. Talk again
Bye-bye.
soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.